this, I would say, is happening over the phone, whereas with auto repair shops, a lot of people would
Fall back. This is like form of stress, not instant.
I realized as I was going through it, I'm like, I'm in flow state. Buddy was passing out. Miles was literally passing out on camera. You guys are gonna get to see it happen. And we thought about removing it, but we decided to ultimately keep it because the idea is to show you the real, raw, authentic, everything as it's happening in the back end. And I'm just gonna let Miles talk to you guys. You know, I mean, floor is his about what he was feeling, what was happening.
And so recently, I'm not even here to make an excuse. It happens. You know what I mean? There's going to be days where you feel like not showing up, or there's every excuse in the book as to why you're going to, feel like falling asleep, whatever it is. I've been switching up my morning routines where I'm just knocking out my gym early in the morning, waking up at 4 a.m.,
Oh
going and
my
slamming
god.
out the gym 5 to 7. It's catching up to me. You know what I mean? And when you're building companies, when you're working on doing all this shit, it is tiring. But
It's draining,
I
of
want,
course.
like Inmar said, exactly. I want you guys to see exactly what goes into the process of all of this. And I'm gonna be it's something that I wanted to be able to look back on and be like, bro, I was literally falling asleep in that meeting. Fast forward 6 months from now, we're gonna be looking back at this and being like, those were times where like I was tired, but we were still showing up and we were still getting the work done. And that's what you have to do
Right.
when it comes to building this shit. There's gonna be days where you don't feel like showing up, and it's easier to go and sit on your couch and go and watch football. You have to sacrifice those kinds of things, especially when you're tired, and you're going to have to sit down at the computer, and you're just going to have to force yourself to look at it even if you're literally falling asleep at the computer. And so that's just a little bit of the cold, hard, brutal, honest truth in what goes into making some of this stuff. But we're going to look back at it in 6 months and we're going to be like, damn,
Right.
it was
And
worth it.
what we've done so far is we have just did the initial brainstorming for the two different industries, at least at a surface level, right? And so both of these different industries, now what we have to do is our job is to figure out which one we need to lean towards and actually start putting our focus into. So here's all of our notes. We are now marking day 3, and that's basically what we have to do, right? So now, mind you, it's not going to take us a tremendous amount of time or energy to do what we need to do for both of these and test them out, right? But the thing we're trying to do here is make the best educated guess, which we can, about where we need to start based on what we have on the platter so far. We're literally going to compare both of them. We're going to have a conversation and we're going to see where that takes us, because everything we build from now and going into the future, literally everything that we're going to be building is going to be based around the selling points, the pain points, the constraints, and the ROI in mind that we did in our brainstorming. So, what are we basing our decision off of here, right? We have to have some sort of truth to all of this, a source of truth that we can look at and say, okay, this is the reason why we chose this. You guys remember, I talked to you guys earlier about the pillars that a lot of businesses care about. So, what are we basing our decision off of, right? We have to have some sort of truth, some sort of source of truth that we can look at and say, okay, this is the reason why we chose this. And you guys remember the things we talked about earlier, the three main pillars that a lot of businesses really care about when they're making decisions, which are going to be solving a clear problem, streamlining manual work, or saving money. Those three things directly tie into the quality of work that's happening, the speed that's happening, and how much work is actually happening, which in the end directly affects the company's growth. So we're just gonna make sure we have these written out here just so that we can actually visually reference them while we talk about this conversation, and so that we can have them in the back of our mind as we go through everything. Boom, we just threw them on the same notes, same whimsical right here. You guys can see these are the decision making pillars, obviously solving a clear problem, streamlining, saving money, and I just listed out what they affect, which is quality, speed, and quantity, in turn more output per unit of time, which adds on to the growth. That's the main pillars for this. Now, what this leads us to right here is the fact that we have to distinguish how much we can directly affect the quality, speed, and the quantity of what's happening. Think about it. How much? That's what I said. We're not thinking about how to solve a problem now. We passed that, right? We're not thinking about how to streamline the work or how to save the money. Instead, at this point, what we're trying to do, bro, is we're trying to see who needs this the most? Who is hungrier? That's what we're trying to measure right here. If we're talking about our old example here of the desert that I explained to you guys before, where basically water was like technology, now we're looking at two different people, right? The two different industries that we're looking at right now, and we're trying to figure out who is thirstier in this example. And just like a real person, right? In order to figure these things out, you have to look at their symptoms. We got to try to find the signs that tell us how thirsty this person is. Just like in business, we have to try to find and look at the signs that tell us how much a business actually needs what we're trying to give them. Now, oftentimes what this looks like is literally statistical data, right? I'm not talking about big, huge, fancy charts and numbers. I mean, in order for us to find out how terrible this pain actually is for that business, we have to go and we have to look at just real numbers that are created by that pain point, okay? What we're gonna do is we're gonna look at each of these different pain points that we researched and we found earlier, and we're gonna find that these two different industries care about different things because of these different pain points. And so we're gonna explore each of those points, and we're going to find three things about these pain points. The first thing we need to find out is how much of this pain point is happening. That's the frequency. This is telling us the frequency of their struggle. Is it a daily struggle? Is it a weekly struggle? Is it an hourly struggle? Whatever it may be, we need to find out how often is this happening. That's the first thing we need to find. The second thing is how annoyed are they that this thing is happening? Is it a mild annoyance? Or do they pray every single day that this thing goes away? Is it a slight inconvenience, or do they really want this gone? And the third thing that we have to find out is what their world would look like if what we're selling them is actually implemented and it actually works. What does that look like? Okay? What improves? What changes? What stops breaking? And the reason why we have to do this is because, let's just say, in the theoretical world where we sold the AI system that we're going to build to both of these different industries, and we let that system run for about a month. After the month, we look back and we just want to measure, we want to see the impact, the thing that we sold them. How impactful was this thing to them? Whichever system had a greater impact, a greater reaction from them, they loved it more. They saw greater ROI from it. That's what gives us the most leverage. Okay. And if you don't know what leverage is, by definition, leverage is the ability to influence an outcome or a decision because of an advantage in a position, resources, or whatever you're offering. What you have is leverage if what you have is something they really, really want. Because we can paint a picture of a world where whatever we're doing this for them, it solves their issue. It gives us the most power when it comes to having those very first sales conversations with them. That's going to be our leverage, right? So think about it like selling a shoe to somebody who has old, beat up shoes versus selling a shoe to somebody who's never had a shoe before. Very perfect example. Think about that. If you sold that shoe to the person that's never had a shoe before, obviously your shoe's impact on them is going to be much greater because they've never had a shoe before. It's literally a different experience for them versus somebody who just had beat up shoes. Well, their experience with this shoe is simply getting upgraded. But if we measure the total impact between both of them, the total impact for the guy with no shoes was greater. Therefore, in that situation, you have the most leverage because you just measured the impact of the thing that you built and sold to them. So that's what we're trying to figure out here with these two different industries. Which one is going to have or would have the greater total impact if the thing we're selling is actually implemented, okay? And the way we do that is we literally have to put ourselves in their position. We say, okay, if this is implemented, then we expect 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to happen. We're just gonna list these things out first. Okay, we have to list them out, and then we're gonna compare them to each other. Once we find these different symptoms, we have to compare them against each other. That's gonna give us the answer we need to find out basically who is thirstier for our build. And from there, we're literally just gonna verify that whatever we came up with is actually backed by previous proof, previous precedent. This is how we verify our actual impact. What this means is we're gonna go out to the internet and we're gonna find different reliable sources of truth that we can point to, and we can say, hey, on average in the United States, X kind of business or wherever country you're from is missing this many calls, which is costing them on average this much money per year. This is a real statistical fact that you can pull from reliable sources on the internet. And this is basically how we're going to be backing our claims and everything that we're trying to do right here. Okay. We're going to be researching right now, and it's basically going to come in this really, really handy situation later when we have conversations with these people, right? So basically the next step right now for us is to list out the symptoms. Again, we're trying to measure the impact by listing out these symptoms and we compare them. We find statistical backing or proof for everything that we need and that we discover and we talked about. And then from there, we make a decision. So now we just did the initial brainstorming, at least at the surface level for both of these. And the next step is going to be attacking those different symptoms to find out where we need to lean into the most. All right, so we have two ways of going about this, right? We could either do this manually, where we literally look at the notes we took, which is very, very fucking ugly and messy, and try to figure out and list out those different pain points, and then from the pain points, look at the symptoms, right? So just think about it having two different sick people, right? We go to them. The pain point for the sick person is my throat hurts. Well, the symptom, regular coughing. The other guy is coughing blood. Obviously, coughing blood is way worse. Therefore, that's the one we need to tend to first. That's basically what we're trying to do here. First, we have to look at the pain points of what's happening, and then we'll determine the symptoms from there. So the two approaches we have is we could either try to jog it a little bit quicker and brainstorm it with the same chat session that we had with GBT, which had this big old freaking prompt telling it, hey, you are a market research niche selection strategist. Since our chat history here, it's going to have more context about where we're at, what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to do it. So we can essentially go back and forth. And I think, Miles, you're on this chat still, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to go back and forth with the chat here and pretty much list them out, or we can manually do it just by talking. I think a hybrid approach is going to be best, where we just do a little bit both. We'll start here, and then we'll see if anything fills through the gap that we can just catch on our own. So
Okay.
all I'm going to do at this point is just give it a context dump of what I'm trying to do, why I'm trying to do it, and then basically it's going to look at the chat history and try to figure out where we need to head to most. So let's just say, okay, I am now trying to compare the two different, can't spell today, never spell, two different niches, and figure out which one is needing our voice AI most by one, listing out their pain points, and after those pain points are listed, I'm gonna look at the symptoms of each that are caused by these pain points, and then compare both symptoms to see which niche or industry makes more sense for us to start with first and needs us more. And all I'm gonna do at this point is literally give it that sick person example just to kind of frame the way that the AI is thinking to the same way that we're thinking, just as extra context in case this doesn't make most sense. Because sometimes you could say something and in your brain, you think you elaborated completely perfectly. It could mean a whole different thing. So that's all I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Is just solidifying how I'm thinking about it. Literally just context dumping, brain dumping everything here. So I'm going to say is if the two different industries were sick people, the pain point would be my throat hurts, and the symptoms could be one of them coughs regularly and the other one coughs blood. We would then obviously tend to the blood coughing first, since we found this symptom to be more impactful and problematic than the other one. Same idea. So that's literally all I did. I just brain dumped into it. Now, hopefully what's going to happen is it's going to look at our chat history. It's going to look at all the research that it did already. And it's going to look at my prompt. It's going to put two and two together and now try to give us at least a starting point. It's not going to give us the answer directly, but it's going to give us something that jogs our brain a little bit so we can work back and forth with it. If you're brainstorming, if you're doing research, if you're just going back and forth, you have two ways, right? You could obviously do it manually. It might take a little bit slower, but if you do it with something like ChatGPT or whatever AI you want to use, it's just a pacer, right? It makes whatever you're trying to do quicker. You don't want it to do it for you, right? You kind of want it to just guide what your thinking already is and kind of paste what you're trying to do. So that's basically what we're trying to do here, right? So now it says, okay, grade framing, the triage, the sickest patient first is exactly how, whatever. Name the core points, show how those pain points manifest as symptoms, and we're going to compare severity, speed of damage, reversibility, and then conclude which it is. All right, so let's see what happens. We have shared underlying pain points, same disease. So it's telling us both home and general auto suffer from the same root, which are, and as we go root through this, I'm gonna try to do the same notes here, so we can then look back at it later and be able to point to all this stuff. So we're gonna say, okay, industry one, pain points, and then I'm gonna leave this to the side right here. You know what? Let's try to do it in a little bit of a different way. I'm gonna draw. This is probably the worst Venn diagram you will ever see. But let's keep it like this, right? Everything here is shared, and then we'll say we'll give number one to the home service, and then we'll give two to the auto, right? And then that's just how we're going to compare. So we have shared underlying pain points. So both of them suffer from call volume exceeding human handling capacity. Let's just do call volume and throw it here in the middle. Calls are revenue bearing but arrive unpredictability. So this also ties to the call volume, because if you have a lot of volume, you can't handle it. Some calls have money attached to them, and if you're missing them, well, you're missing money. So we're gonna say call volume missed calls to missed revenue. I'm actually gonna change this to call volume handling missed calls to missed revenue. Multitasking, invisible but costly. Intake quality degrades under pressure. After hours demand exists but is poorly covered. So that's a very good one right here. After hours poorly covered. This one ties into the old one that we just said, which is the second one. Intake quality degrades under pressure. So what this means is probably the call quality of what's happening with the customer on the call goes down if there's a lot happening, because obviously they can't put a lot of time into that call, or maybe put the same amount of energy or focus into it. I don't think that's really a huge pain point to even list here in the first place. This is more of a nice to have and not really a need. And realistically, the better this is, the better overall your company's CSAT is, which is customer satisfaction. Which again, like, it helps with returning customers and how people treat the company and look about it. But it's not a necessary component for getting the job done. Because think about it, you could have a person with no personality and a person with personality, and they both could say and do the same exact things, but one of them just makes you feel nicer. So we'll keep this out of here. So at the diagnosis level, both patients have the same. The decision comes down to how severe these symptoms are. Let's do symptoms for each industry. So missed or delayed call handling. That's the biggest one, obviously. For home services, so emergency or same day callers immediately call competitors. This is a very big one. If something is happening in your house, you are looking for speed, you're looking for right now. And if that person does not have the speed or does not have the right now, or maybe can't pick up, the person is not gonna wait. Obviously, they have to hurry up and fix whatever's in the house. So they're gonna jump, and we're gonna list that here, right? That's gonna be, so this is a symptom. These are pain points. Sorry. So these are shared pain points. Let me just list this out, by the way. Shared pain points. Help me out here. So emergency or same day callers immediately call competitors. That's not really a symptom though. That's like, it's more of a,
Yeah.
right? That is a pain point.
Mm,
So this Venn
emergency.
diagram, here, let's do this. No, that is a symptom. Because if it exceeds
Yeah.
capacity, then this happens. So if this happens, then this happens. So let's do this. We'll call this pain points only, and then we'll list out symptoms here and there. Caused by pain points. And then here we're gonna do auto. All right, I know it looks very ugly, but the job here is not to look pretty. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, here we have pain points, and because these pain points exist, here's how the symptoms are affecting this industry. So this is a symptom happening because missed calls are happening and call volume handling is an issue. Well, now you obviously have people that are gonna skip your company. They're gonna call the next different market, that's next place, or the next business. Let me jump back here. Lost jobs are often $300 to $3,000. So we're gonna say missed call equals 300 minimum. So that's how much a missed call costs for a home service. Loss happens within minutes. No callback opportunity. Custom never enters system. Owner never knows what was lost. I'd say this is the biggest. I don't know if it's worth. So there's something interesting right here. If you have a call that comes in and it was never recorded or written down anywhere that this call happens, it was just missed. If you're able to call these customers back, there's a big chance you could still recover some revenue. It's not, may not be the same thing that they originally called about, but there is always money for existing customers or customers that you're following up with. Now, whether this is tracked or not, that's gonna be, I think this is something that everybody would love to do, but not everybody has the time or capacity to do unless it's somehow already automated where a phone number calls a company and then they somehow immediately as soon as that call comes in can put that phone number somewhere for a callback, or somebody would have to open up and call them back. I don't know if this is really a symptom though. Let's try reading the rest of this just to see if we can tie things. Auto repair system. Missed calls often happen during business hours. Caller may try again on the voicemail. Job may be delayed. Revenue often degrades over hours or days. Some recovery possible via callback. This is like organ stress, not instant. Call collision overload. So home systems. Two calls collide. One goes to voicemail. That's gone. There's no queue. There's no buffer. Caller intent is often high and urgent. So a lost call. So far, what I'm seeing right now is for home and services, there's a lot more urgency and there is not much of a bounce back after those calls go away. Whereas with auto repair, there's not the same level of urgency. So if we're talking about the sick person, we're talking about these people are essentially going to the ER versus this person, they can still hold off on their sickness. They don't really have to be in the ER, but they can essentially take more pain and wait a little bit more. That's what I'm seeing here. So both of them have calls colliding. However, these people are much likely to go away if they're directed to voicemail, whereas these people might not. The reason why is because, well, the car repair or some issue, some symptom happening with the car does not really mean that the car is totally non-operatable, right? Obviously, they can still probably drive it unless it is really, really like completely not drivable, which is, I think, is much less likely happening with auto shops. Whereas for these guys, it's almost all the time something that needs to be taken care of quicker because it impacts your home quality, your living. So revenue impact is probabilistic, not immediate. Shop might still stay busy despite the inefficiency, right? Because these people are having a lot of walk-ins as well. So you got to compare home service businesses. They're not really having people walking into the store to report some of these things. Most of this, I would say, is happening over the phone. Whereas with auto repair shops, a lot of people would go with their vehicle to the shop and actually speak right there because obviously they have mechanics and they have everything at the local physical facility. Because of this, I would say these people are probably getting more phone calls than these people by nature, just because a lot of people can walk into auto repair shops where I would say most people would not just think the first thing in their mind is, hey, if something's wrong with my AC in the house or whatever, that I'm going to walk into the home service building. I'm just going to call them. So that's another thing. Let me put that. Let me just list these here. Receives more calls naturally since auto. So home services receive more calls naturally since auto businesses have walk-in customers. And two, auto can still be busy despite inefficiencies with the phone. Is there a physical location? And because yo, you good, bro?
Like falling asleep sitting here, bro. I'm so tired. I'm so tired, bro.
How about this, Brian? Don't worry about it, bro. Obviously, last time Miles had a minor incident, but he was tired. So you know what I'm saying. Right now, what we're trying to do right now is basically pick up off exactly where we were last time, which was listing the different pain points for each specific industry that we're honing in on, and then we're gonna find the symptoms that are relating to those pain points, and then we're gonna find the symptoms relating to those pain points. That's basically how bad the pain point actually is. And then from there, we're going to compare the symptoms and figure out which one needs us the most. So just to pick up off of where we left last time, we did a brain dump to ChatGPT. We literally just told it everything we're trying to do. Because again, the goal is to kind of use AI to help us brainstorm, not use it to solve the problem. So we're literally just giving it a brain dump of everything we're trying to say. Hey, I'm trying to compare the two different niches and figure out which one is needing voice AI the most. One, by listing out their pain points. After those pain points are listed, I'm going to look at the symptoms of each one caused by these pain points. And then we're going to compare symptoms to see which niche or industry makes more sense for us to start with. If the two different industries were sick people, we just gave it pretty much an image to paint so that way you can understand the kind of thinking that we're trying to take here. We gave it a little bit of an example. We said, hey, if the two different industries were sick people, the pain point would be my throat hurts, and the symptom would be one of them coughing regularly versus the other one coughing blood. Obviously, the symptom where the blood coughing is going to be the one where we need to tend to the most, since that one is more impactful and more problematic. That's the kind of approach we're taking. So its response was, hey, okay, now I'm going to name the core pain points for each niche, and then we're going to talk about the symptoms inside of each of them, and then we're going to compare their severity, speed, and reversibility for those. So step one, right now we're looking at the shared underlying pain points. What I did, because these were shared by two different industries, we created a small Venn diagram where in the middle we have the shared pain points, and on the left side what we have is the home service industry. But what we're going to do is we're going to list symptoms here, and we're going to list the symptoms for the auto industry on the right. And then once we list those out, then we're going to go back and actually try to compare them. So far we have a few different shared pain points that we actually care about. Obviously there's a little bit more here, but we're just going to go through why I put what I put. Call volume exceeds human handling capacity. That's self-explanatory. If they can't handle the volume of calls that are happening, obviously that's going to lead to an influx of calls being mixed, and the calls that are missed is missed revenue. So that's going to be the one that's shared in the middle. I have both of them right here. And then the next thing we have is the human multitasking while answering the phone. That's also self-explanatory because you can't pick up the second phone call, and they're also doing stuff while they're talking on the phone. So a lot of these are related. You're going to see like this call volume exceeds human handling capacity, and the missed calls are invisible but costly. Right? These two are related, because if you're missing calls because you can't handle the capacity, that's going to be, costly for you. So we didn't list out the ones that are pretty much common sense, right? We just listed out the ones that we know we need to list for the first time, so that way we can have a bird's eye view of what we're looking at, instead of, having to have this like intermingled sort of picture that this is, all of these things are relating to each other. They affect each other. We wrote down call volume handling, missed calls lead to missed revenue, and the after hours were poorly covered, meaning if a business stops taking phone calls at 4 p.m., any call that comes in 4 p.m. and afterwards is not covered at all. Those were the three biggest shared pain points that we're trying to solve. Now what we're going to look at is the symptoms. Let's say if the call volume is too much and calls slip, which industry gets affected the most? Does the home service industry get affected the most, or does auto? If a missed call is missed, how much revenue is actually missed? What does that call actually cost for home service versus an auto? If an auto job costs $600 and a home service costs $900, then the $900 call is obviously more costly to miss, and that's the ones that you don't want to miss. So you want to focus more on the ones that are high revenue. But then you can also compare the fact that the two different industries don't receive the same quality of calls all the time. For example, 80% of the home service calls are not revenue generating calls, but maybe 80% of the home service calls are not actually jobs that are, waiting in emergencies to be picked, that are $900 jobs. And maybe the majority of calls for auto are that, but the actual revenue cost for the call is less. So if you get 10 calls that are each worth $300 versus 2 calls that are missed and each of them are worth $900, which one is worth more, right? Obviously we have to do the math on that and average out how many calls are being missed per month, and that's how we're going to get a better understanding of which industry is actually bleeding more because they're missing calls. So this is the kind of logic that I'm trying to understand. We're just going to go through what ChatGPT is telling us and figure out where our brains lead us when we're thinking about it. So emergency same day calls, immediately call competitors. Missed calls, we know that's very, very important, because if something is happening with your home system, you want it fixed now. Whereas with auto repair, that's most of the time the case is not having to be an emergency situation with the car. They hear a sound, they hear a creak, they see a check engine light. These things can wait, right? Whereas if your AC is broken or if your furnace is having an issue, whatever, there is a much higher likelihood of a job being more of an emergency based, because it's relating to a home versus a car. Car usually can wait a little bit. So we're going to take that at basically face value and assume that a lot of the calls that are happening here are going to be more related to, hey, we need this done right now. But again, that's not verified. We're still going to want to verify how many of these calls are actually coming in on average. The lost jobs are often $300 to $3,000 depending on the kind of job. The loss happens within minutes because they're calling and then they're done with the call. Now they want to call the next person. No callback opportunity. Well, usually if they move on from this person that they're calling and they get a hold of somebody else, they want that person to kind of stick with them until their problem is done, because there's no sense in going back and calling somebody that didn't pick up the phone call the first time. Customer never enters the system. Well, because they never had the conversation, they never had a chance to be in that CRM, to have their information gathered, to have a follow-up with the company at all. And the owner never knew what was lost because none of those calls are even being tracked or recorded. So that's what we have right now for the home service symptoms. Let's look at our chart here and see which ones of these do we actually care about. We care about the lost jobs being $300 to $3,000. And I wrote right here, the missed calls are a minimum of $300. We're just going to keep it at the least amount because that's the best that it's going to get. You're missing $300 at minimum. So let's look at auto repair symptoms. The missed calls often happen during business hours. So that tells me that they're probably juggling things, because if you're working during business hours and you have the time, then you would not be missing those calls. So they're doing multiple things. Caller may try again or leave a voicemail. This tells me that there's less urgency. If they're trying again or leaving a voicemail, they're not really pushed to find somebody immediately. The job may be delayed, not lost immediately. Again, this leads me to think that this could wait. The same hypothesis that I thought about earlier, where a car situation could wait a little bit because it's not as urgent. Revenue often degrades over hours or days, because if you're missing calls, these calls accumulate over a duration of time, but they're not really heavy hitting once they happen, right? You can feel at the end of the month you missing out on revenue, but you can't really feel it immediately as soon as that call happens, because these calls can be missed the first time and they can come back again to, on the second day or a third day. Some recovery could still be possible via callback because they're not having that big urgency factor into it. So this is like organ stress, not instead. What is this word? I don't even know how to say that. Hemorrhage. I don't know what this means.
Hemorrhage.
An escape of blood from a rupture. What the? Okay, what made it choose hemorrhage, bro? Well, okay. Oh, it's comparing it to that little bleeding effect that we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest pain point again is call collisions, meaning multiple calls coming at the same time, and overload of calls. And obviously we have that written right here in the middle. So 2 calls fail, 1 goes to voicemail, the second one's gone. No queue, no buffer. Caller intent is often high and urgent. Lost call equals lost truck slot for the day. So this is for home service. And then you have the auto repair. 2 calls collide, 1 goes to voicemail. Caller may still drop off later. Revenue impact is probabilistic, not immediate, and the shop may still be busy despite efficiencies. This is because they have walk-ins. Immediately, the first thing I see is the home and service symptoms. 1 are greater in urgency because they're revolved around emergencies, things that need to be taken care of as soon as possible because they're relating to somebody's home, right? You're living in it, you're experiencing it, and you don't want to be in that experience much longer, right? The pain of the customer being high, meaning that there's a higher priority on the calls that are missed right here. Because if it's a high pain point, they want to get rid of it ASAP. Whereas the pain threshold is lower for auto repair. I mean, they could wait, right? Let's say somebody doesn't pick up, they can wait and call them about 2 hours. This car's still going to be making noise or doing whatever it needs to do, but it's not like breaking down on the road. So for after hours home services, they skew heavily towards emergencies. Let's try to cover these here real quick. So there's a few different factors we're measuring here. Let's talk about frequency. So I want to know this right now, right? Just off of what we just read, how many calls on average does each industry even receive per month? I'm just going to go back to the research here. I'm going to say research online and find on average how many calls are received per month by the home service industry in comparison to the auto industry. And let's see, I just want to get a baseline of how many calls are happening, because let's say home service calls are more impactful, but if they happen way less than the auto, then technically the auto is a little bit more impactful because they have a lot more customers that are feeling this. For service advisor and automotive industry, so dealership service departments and larger repair shops, around 500 calls per month on average. Independent repair shops see about 24 calls per day, which line up to 500, 600 a month. Very large contacts, they can be okay. Auto repair typically receive 400 to 600 per month. Okay, what about home service? There's less public data available, but we can infer from industry benchmarks. Home service businesses miss around 27% of incoming calls, and that is a typical plumber receives around 15 to 25 calls per day, so about 600 calls per month. Using the 20 calls per day as a conservative daily call volume, 600 a month, would vary by specialty. So this is talking about plumbing specifically, not necessarily HVAC and electrical. What if we wanted to know about HVAC and electrical numbers in comparison to plumbing? I don't like that it compared just plumbing and kind of left out HVAC and electrical. And these are like different.
50 to 100 days calls in a single peak day.
I mean, these are like different verticals inside the home service industry. So technically, they're not really all the same. They can't really be treated the same.
Yeah.
HVAC contractors often see significantly more than other trades because of seasonal spikes during peak season. Okay, so here's the deal, right? What are the different verticals in home service? What I notice is that there's different, when I say vertical, by the way, I mean like different type of work that's being done in the industry. Obviously, you have the plumbing, you have electrical, and you have HVAC. These are three different ones, but plumbing numbers could be different from HVAC, could be different from electrical. Let me figure out within the home service industry which one of these three are hitting those pain points the most. So right now I'm just asking it, what are those different verticals in the home service,
Yeah.
just to make sure we're not missing anything. And then after that, I'm probably gonna just compare them here very, very quickly. We're gonna say home service verticals. I don't think ChatGPT took the word vertical the way I was thinking about it. Types of trades. So I just clarified. I said when I say verticals, I meant the different types of trades. All right. So HVAC, plumbing, electrical, roofing, and general handyman work. Mechanical and system based, damage, restoration trades, exterior. Okay, so there's a lot here. I wonder, almost all spectrum across three dimensions, urgency, call volume, or HVAC sit at the top of all of these three. So HVAC, plumbing, water damage, garage doors. All right, we'll do this. Based on research, show me the top 5. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, plumbing.
So it's like
That's what I thought.
plumbing is the number 1, electrical service is number 2, HVAC, roofing, and garage door services. Where did it get that? Most searched home services on Google 2025. So this Hooks agency is its source of truth. This was published in May 22nd, 2025. Okay, 2026. So it looks like 90 billion. Yep. Here's where it's listing
Plumbing.
those. All right, so it looks like plumbing is number 1. Here's the deal though. Just because they get called a lot does not mean that they experience the same depth of pain as these guys. Because all these three can realistically, like, let's just call it a baseline. These guys can get 100 calls. These guys can get 100 calls, and these guys could get 100 calls. What is each call worth? How urgent is each call? And what is the meaning of missing a call based on these three? I'm literally just gonna ask that to GPT. I'm gonna jump back here. I'm gonna say,
You know what I'm thinking?
huh?
Maybe people are already doing this research and they're seeing plumbing as an industry that's already it has such high traffic volume. And so people who are doing maybe the same thing as us are adding to that. So maybe a lot of their calls are inquiries about seeing if they can do something for the plumbing company. You know what I mean?
So at a wider, bigger scale, I think calls that are happening that are sales calls are probably less than 4 or 5% of the calls that are actually
Yeah.
being received. Like you would think a lot people are calling a lot more for these businesses, but when it really comes down to it, if you went and asked somebody for the last 6 months, how many sales calls have you gotten? It's nowhere even near the number of actual calls. I mean, they'll still probably have a few. Let's say 10. I don't think any business is getting more than 10 sales calls, to be honest, and at least a 3-month duration. But again, like, what am I saying this for? I'm kind of saying this without really verifying it. Of course, I'm gonna have to jump online and do this. But you gotta think about the number of people cold calling these people versus the number of people that are genuinely having an issue. And a lot of these people are local businesses. And when it comes to cold calling businesses, people tend to not really target local businesses for this kind of stuff, just because, they play in their own little set of rules, and you have to have a specific niche kind of thing to really want to sit and talk to local businesses. A lot of people, I think, when they focusing on calling these businesses, it's not. I really do think the numbers aren't even comparable. But I guess we just don't. There's only one way to verify it. Let me ask this, and then we'll verify afterwards. See what happens.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna brain dump what I'm trying to do right now. It says, okay, so I need to compare the impact of their pain points against each other. For example, if each industry received 100 calls, what is missing a call worth to each industry, and compared to the average number of calls they miss, what does that look like in revenue? So right now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compare both of the basically the density of their calls, right? Let's say for electrical you have 27% chance of missing calls pulled from reports, whereas for plumbing you have 33%. Well, if you missing 33 calls for this industry and missing 27 for this industry, but the 27 calls on average cost more per call, technically the other industry misses more calls, but it is losing less revenue than the second industry with 27 calls, even if they're getting less calls, if that makes sense. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. If each industry received 100 calls, what is missing a call worth to each industry? And compared to the average number of calls they miss, what does that look like in revenue? And I'm literally just going to give it the same example I just told you. For example, missing 27 calls in industry A is worth more than missing 33 calls in industry B. That means industry A loses more revenue. I need to get the numbers for those three and compare them. Use research-based facts. All right, I pretty much
It says
literally just
here
what's that?
conversions, home services have high conversion percentages from calls, while auto leads have strong revenue potential when they're handled well.
Where are you seeing that?
I just asked ChatGPT to pretty much just break it down, go more in depth. We're doing market research right now for a voice automation system. And I was just asking how many calls on average do home services receive in a day, do the same research for auto industry and compare them.
Here's a research-based
Can I show
revenue
it?
comparison for the three home service verticals evaluating plumbing, electrical, and HVAC in the context of missed calls and their impact. All right, so call volume and missed call rates across the board. Home services, including plumbing, home services, about 27% of inbound trades, like 25 to 30% miss range. So for every 100 calls, about 25 to 30 are missed, and that's for home services in general. Average value per call. If experiment per missed call varies by trade because of jobs, and the different trades have different ticket values, we can estimate range from industry sources. Missed calls can represent about $1,200 in lost revenue per call for general home service. Plumbing tends to be medium to high ticket, often involving urgent problems like leaks, hot water issues. So conservative assumption is $1,200. This is for plumbing. For HVAC, are somewhat lower for basic service calls, but can skyrocket with emergency repairs. We have a range here for HVAC. Where does that range start and where does it end? Some industry analysis indicates they start about $250 to $300 in value for standard service calls, and emergencies can be priced higher, often several hundred to a few thousand, depending on what's happening. We'll give it a good assumption and say a lot of the calls that are happening are not emergency, like all sorts of businesses. So we'll say 300 to 800 for HVAC. So let me just write this down here. So HVAC, and I'm just gonna write price per call equals
$800.
300
Or is that?
to we'll give it 1,000 just because we still probably have
Yeah.
to account for those higher ranges. Emergency. Okay, so the first one that we did was what, plumbing. So I'm just gonna make this bigger and throw plumbing. So $1,200. So plumbing, HVAC, and then electrical. Smaller electrical jobs are often 150 to 300 in range. And a rough example for small businesses, again, 15, 60%. So we'll give it at 800, $180. Let's also include the fact that it could be 500 just because
Yeah,
it's on the higher end.
yeah, I think the value for each missed call, even in the plumbing industry, I think it would be more. Cause I know a dude who used to do plumbing and he was telling me that he was selling like $14,000 jobs, and sometimes it would vary like all the way up to very high ticket jobs.
Yeah. So check this out, right? At first, here we see that home service businesses miss about 27% of inbound calls, and that's according to
Oh, look at that stressed out plumber.
November 2025. Or what does that say? Call tracking data reveals that home service businesses miss an average for their small and mid-sized businesses. That number can skyrocket. Okay, so this is not even accounting for small and mid-sized businesses, which is probably who we're talking to. And it's saying that could be as high as 62. Where is it getting this? What is call tracking data? Looks like it's an article by a UK blog. And these are often urgent, leaky, what's the home service? Expensive. Consumer choose companies they work. While they do most of their research online, that will call to get more information, get quotes, and set appointments. This survey found that 60% will call before making a purchase. When it's an emergency, you can expect the number to even higher. We also found that 76% will stop doing business with a company after a single bad experience. 60% will pay even more for better service. So here's that 27% number again, which makes sense because these guys referenced it from these guys. Our research found that 20 that could amount to thousands. That okay? I want to know who are these guys? So they're obviously trying to sell something. They're trying to sell call tracking, which essentially is to help you figure out the metadata behind lost calls, so that way you know how much money you're missing and stuff like that. And I'm assuming these guys, when they say according to our research, I don't know how much I can trust that because their research is profit based, right? Of course, they're gonna show you the numbers that help their profits, right? Only makes more sense.
Yeah.
They're not gonna show you the real thing. Let's just go to Google. Let's literally just Google it. I just Googled Google. All right.
Come on, somebody.
Yo Zeke. Yo Zeke.
Hey, boy, Google.
Yo
I'm gonna
B.
Google ChatGPT
Yo
on
B Lou.
ChatGPT.
Yo B Lou. Hold up. What am I gonna search? I literally just forgot. Oh, what is the
Uh,
average number of missed calls?
but I think with home service industries, it's not.
So yeah, we're still getting that 27% even with Google's AI.
Yeah.
27 to 30%. All right, we saw the number 27% from few different places. I think it's safe to say. So House Call Pro is also saying 27%. That's the one we were just on. I mean, even then, like it goes from 27 to like 35. So we'll just use the base number. We'll say 27. All right. So if we're using with 27%, based on 100 calls, value for missed call would mean that 100 missed calls for plumbers, if the value is $1,200 on average, would it be $3,200? Whereas for HVAC, it's 21,000, and for electrical, it's the least. So here's our big bad boys in the equation: is plumbing and HVAC. And I don't think we should discriminate between plumbing and HVAC because there's not much work that's added on top of our workload for us to literally target both, right? And they both
Yeah, and it's a really good industry to target too.
So right now, let's try to cook up our argument here and jump back. Let's see if we can answer some of these questions here. So frequency. So for frequency, we'll say one. HVAC, how often is this happening? Once a month, every day. On average, 27% across the home service industry. Now I need to figure out how many calls on average do plumbers get per month and how many calls on average do HVAC receive per month, and then figure out which ones are receiving more. Because the 27, well, obviously plumbers cost more, but doesn't mean they're getting more calls. So again, these numbers, yeah, they're based off of 100 calls, which we gave it. The 100 calls here is not the real number of calls on average that they're getting per month. Purely theoretical. We're saying that these calls are worth more than these calls because the base number of their jobs is worth more. So now let's figure out the real numbers because you know what I mean, if these guys are getting more calls than plumbing, well, I mean, obviously means HVAC is losing more revenue than plumbing. So let's see.
Yeah. How many calls on average do plumbers and HVAC receive each month?
So research online and check verified sources for how many calls on average do
My bad.
plumbers receive each month, and how many calls on average does HVAC receive per month? And we're gonna say small to medium sized businesses. And let's say which town were we talking about again here? New Mexico?
Farmington, New Mexico.
Okay. Let's figure out the base numbers first and then we'll narrow it down to Farmington, New Mexico. All right, so plumbing call volume. According to industry reporting on home services, many established plumbing receive 15 to 25 per day, which translates to about 600 calls per month when using the 20 calls per day as a baseline versus HVAC. So these guys are, so HVAC is actually getting more calls. So we see 30 to 70 inbound calls per month in normal marketing operations and peak seasons up to 100 to 135 per month for well market. Oh, wait. So wait. This is per month. Why did it tell me the per day first? And then, all right. I thought it was comparing. So for HVAC during peak
Silly
seasons,
AI. Because it's for plumbing and then HVAC.
it looks like a lot of people are
See that?
having more problems with their shitters than their AC. That's what this tells me.
Because that Charmin, dude. Charmin, dude, my pipes get plugged by Charmin.
All right, so it looks like
That's the
plumbing
leading
is
factor.
much higher. The reason why is
Yeah.
because plumbing needs it has leaks, clogs, water here issues, call before booking is plumbing highly call driven compared to okay, so highly call driven compared to many other trades. HVAC has a seasonal component, right? You got to talk about winter versus summer versus spring, and obviously you're gonna have different effects that can affect the HVAC system. Well, if you guys don't know what HVAC is, I've just been saying it. HVAC is your heating and cooling system in your house. So that's
Heating, ventilation.
yeah, heating, cooling, ventilation, all that good stuff. All right, so it looks like we found our winner, right? We got plumbing businesses, but let's try to answer these questions here, right? So on average, 20% across home service industries. We found out that there were there's actually a big list full of different types of businesses that are inside of the home service. We found the top three and we narrowed it down to specifically plumbers, which are plumbers, HVAC, and electric work. For plumbers, we are getting about 600. Was that right?
600 a month.
You know,
About.
let's use the
estimate.
minimum baseline for each. I don't like to go maximum. We're gonna say 500 calls per month. 500 calls. Where are we at? Per month. Yo, guys, sorry to interrupt. I just figured out during post editing that we did a small math miscalculation right here. Obviously, 500 times 1,000 is not 50,000, right? It's 500. But here's the thing. I'm looking at this back from the future. We redid our numbers and we redid our averages and all that good stuff. So this part right here, the concept itself of what we're doing, like the actual process, is correct. However, just the numbers are wrong, and we're gonna fix this later when you guys watch the future episodes. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. Don't get confused about the numbers. Take note of the process, right? The fact that you have to figure out the averages and how much each is called and how many they're worth and how much percentages of that you should take. All of that entire thing is still the business process that you need to understand how to do, right? Just don't worry about the numbers. We will fix it in the future episodes. So at an average of, we'll say $1,000 per job. So that is 500 times 1,000 equals 50. And then let's say 24 times 0.27 because that's 20%. So we're gonna say 50 x 0.27. $13,500 is our answer, ladies and gentlemen. Let's jump back here. Wait, no, not here.
Yeah.
13,500. So we just found out that plumbers, on average, if they're actually missing 27%, and that's off of industry baseline, that's off of reports that are reported across the industry, and we're assuming they're getting $1,000 per job. Again, researching it off of industry baselines. If they're getting 500 calls per month at least $1,000, obviously they're not going to be closing all of every single thing, but they could potentially be missing $13,500 if they were actually hitting all of those jobs for all the calls that they're actually getting. So let's figure out frustration level here now. Is this a mild annoyance, something they actively want gone? Are people complaining or just tolerating it? Well, this ties directly to the fact of urgency and emergencies, right? Yeah, so we just read literally 2 seconds ago. Yeah, so we literally just read that 76% will stop doing business with the company after a single bad experience. We just read, like, in one of those articles that said that, what, 82% of people won't call back after their very first missed call for plumbers. That ties directly to the fact that
85%.
we're gonna say like 85% of people, if they're experiencing an urgent situation that has something to do with their plumbing, they call a plumbing company. The plumbing company does not pick up. They will call a second one. They're not gonna call the first one, meaning that the frustration level is fairly high for these guys, because if they're missing calls because they're juggling jobs or they're on another call, well, that's immediate lost revenue because these guys are not going to call back. So because there's the urgency factor, this tells me they would probably love to not miss these calls, because obviously everybody wants to add more to their monthly revenue. So we're going to say 85% of callers with emergency jobs will not call back. We'll find another plumber. And the urgency on this,
Customers getting attended to quicker, which leads to happier customers over time.
yeah, but what
How
I'm
would you
trying to
be
measure,
able to
what I'm
say
trying to
that,
measure
Tom?
here is the frustration level of the business. How do you measure how frustrated these people are for missing these kinds of jobs? You have to directly tie it to that amount of revenue that they are missing or they're leaving off the table. So let's do this. I'm literally gonna brain dump as I talk. Urgent call equals less forgiveness, and callbacks equals much higher chance of losing a high ticket job, equals urgent calls means there's less forgiveness and callbacks because they're urgent, meaning there's a much higher chance of losing a high ticket job, equals much higher chance of leaving revenue on the table, equals missed profits, right? So I would say there's also a customer satisfaction level to this, because if somebody's not picking up the phone on them and they're dealing with something, they're going to be a little bit more frustrated. We're going to say this future impacts future customer loyalty and customer volume, right? Because if you think about it, everybody that's missed and they end up calling a different plumbing business and they have a better experience with those guys, what's the chance that the next time they have a plumbing issue, they're going to call the people that they already dealt with? It's much higher. So the volume of those customers sticking to that company is growing better and better, because they're getting and they're accepting those calls in the beginning. They're not missing those calls. They're literally retaining more customers as each call is picked up, meaning they're growing their customer base. Which, if you guys don't know, one of the most important things when you first get your very, very first customer is to make sure their experience is flawless. The better their experience is, the more likely they're going to come back to you again and again and again. They're going to be a repeating customer. Your main job when you're building a business or you're selling a service is not to just sell to one person and be done. You want that person to keep coming back to you for other things. So a lot of the time when I'm building systems for these people, I am trying super, super extra triple hard the very first time, if it's my first time actually sitting with them, because that experience is going to lead to one, them being able to refer me to other people, right? So if they have friends that are, in businesses or business owners, they want to be able to tell these people, hey, these guys did a good job. That's more money from referrals. Number two, if they have another system in the future, they're going to want to come back because I did a very good job the first time. So this leads to, again, one, me growing that customer base because I'm having these people come back, immediately impacts the customer satisfaction because they're happy with me the very first time. So this impacts their future customer loyalty and customer volume, which again has direct impact on long-term growth. That's what we're going to call it, right? Because if you're retaining customers, your revenue is growing for the long term. It's not immediate, but you have a much higher chance of these people coming back to you in the future for something that they bought from you if they already bought from you before. So what is the outcome if it's fixed? And so if this is fixed, the very first thing they should expect to see is higher monthly revenues, right? Because we're getting more jobs that are not going to another plumber, and we are getting long-term customers because we're picking up those calls the very first time and we're making sure those experiences are good. We're taking care of those jobs, and which directly impacts long-term revenue, and you see immediate increased customer satisfaction. And I just explained to you guys why, because you're not missing that call when somebody's having a big problem that's a plumbing issue. So that's the immediate outcomes, is a higher monthly revenue. That's just off of the fact that they're picking up more calls, long-term customers, and long-term revenue because those people are having their very first experience taken care of and their very first problem taken care of, which also ties into the customer satisfaction of their customer base because they're not missing those calls and they're making sure that the job is taken care of. That's the immediate outcome if this is fixed. We just did that for the home service business. Now let's jump and do the exact same thing. So I'm literally gonna label this right now. Instead of home service, I'm gonna start throwing plumbing on it because I think now we have a reason to stick to plumbing. We're not gonna jump into HVAC and electrical. And let's do the exact same thing pretty much for part two, which is the auto service, right? Let's jump back and clear this up. And we're gonna say auto. So how often is this happening? Frustration. I'm just gonna clear all of this out, and outcome if fixed. That's what we're gonna fill out here for the auto, and then we're gonna compare both of them and see exactly where we land. Let's jump back here. So I'm just gonna go back to the same ChatGPT chat, and I'm gonna say, okay, now let's move on from home services and do what we did, but for the auto industry. Let's assume we went back to the first thing I told you, which was, and I'm just gonna go back and tell it the same brain dump that I told it earlier. But let's do it for the auto industry. Is there other trades within auto? And if so, let's do the same comparisons we did with the plumbing versus electrical. Can't even spell versus HVAC. It doesn't matter. It'll get it. All right, I just gave it a brain dump. I said, let's move from home service. Let's do the same thing for auto. And then I just told it what I told it earlier. And I said, now let's try to focus on auto if there's different trades within auto. And let's do the same comparison like we did with plumbing versus electrical versus HVAC. Now we're just going to let it try to cook up what it needs to. And then we're just going to analyze what comes out of it and just verify that everything it's telling us is actually right. Define the major auto industry trades. Within auto and mobility, the core call-driven trades are general auto repair, tire shops, towing, collisions, and dealerships. We're going to exclude dealerships because long sales cycle. Yeah, we're not going to even deal with dealerships. So our real comparison is general auto repair, tire shops, towing, and collisions. Now let's identify the shared pain points. So I have the same root pain points. Phones ring constantly, calls arrive unpredictable, human multitasking, missed calls, intake quality degrades because there's a volume. So phone rings constantly. There's a lot of phone calls happening. And of course, you got to understand that these guys have a physical shop. Calls come in unpredictably. They come in throughout the day. Human multitasking while answering because they're at a physical shop. They're probably doing a bunch of stuff while taking calls. And taking calls is not the main thing that they have to do. Missed calls are invisible. They're not being tracked. Intake quality degrades under volume, meaning if you're getting 3 to 4 calls, the quality that you're giving out to the customers because you're getting more calls is degrading, right? It's getting worse and worse. Callbacks fail, so you try to call back and you try to understand that, at the time when you call back, these people are even not available. Maybe they got a hold of some other business. But you got to also, we talked about the fact that this is not as prominent as it is for home services. These callbacks have more leniency in the auto industry than the home service because home services have more emergency type calls, and then after hour demand exists. So let's see here. Symptoms by auto trade. We'll assume 100 inbound calls. So the same kind of example we did earlier. The number one is general auto repair, and these are independent shops. What is the core pain point? There's high volume of calls. A lot of these calls are repetitive. They collide. Then they have limited staff, right? Because they're not going to have a huge team. And what are the symptoms that are caused by these pain points? Well, there's missed calls that are happening during their business hours. We talked about all of this stuff already. Missed call severity. So we have an average job valuing 300 to 600 for general auto repair. Let's note that here. Let's do the same thing that we did earlier. I'm just going to say, we're just going to go like this. And I'm going to type auto repair. So $300 to $600. Let's see. Many calls were retry or drop off later. Revenue loss is leaky, not explosive. Meaning, what this means is, like, if you compare the fact that the plumber misses a call, it is explosive because they're immediately going to try to call another plumber and immediately try to get on with the job that they're trying to get on with because it has more urgency. Whereas this, there's less of that urgency, meaning there's more leniency, meaning the call could leak, right? There's more leniency for it, actually being missed versus not missed. So 300 to, so we're just going to write the same stuff we wrote earlier, 300 to 600 per call. We have tire shops, so that's number 2. Let's try to put that here. Same symptoms pretty much. $100 to $150 on average. So I'm just gonna say $100 to $250 missed per call. Missed calls hurt throughput, not survival. Meaning that the missed calls that are happening for tire shops, they just impact how much, what the word throughput means is how much work that they have in their pipeline for them to do, not the fact that they're, able to even stay alive. It's just how much work is coming into them. Loss is moderate and cumulative. It means I want to understand why. Dive into why loss is moderate and cumulative for tire shops. I just want to know why. So unlike HVAC, plumbing, or towing, they're not primarily selling emergency solutions. They're selling a commodity, availability, and convenience. So even when they need a tire, it's usually not immediately disabling. Okay, that makes more sense. Let's just go back and see where we were at. So the third one is actually towing, and the average job value is $150 to $500. Let's do this. To 500 per call. And we're going to say this is towing. Conversion window is in minutes. I actually don't even know how towing really works. Like, how does a tow company get its job?
I know a dude who had his own tow truck, and people would literally just call him whenever they needed a tow, and they would just pay him cash on the scene.
So it's so that's probably why it says conversion window is minutes, because you either miss the call or you don't, right? And every missed call is 100% lost revenue. High stress on the operators. So you literally have to act immediately once that call comes in, because most of the time when somebody's calling to tow a car, that's already been decided and done. They just need somebody to do it. you're not even really having to sell the service. You're most of the time having to respond and be available. Your value here is availability, which we can use that availability to our advantage when we're talking to tow companies, because we can say, hey, the fact that you're getting this call, you don't even have to sell your towing services. People are already sold. They just need somebody to do it, meaning your availability matters more than other people who would have to convince somebody to go with them. You don't even have to do that. You have to just make sure that you're available there and you have the capacity to do the towing. There is actually a higher value on the towing company missing calls, and it's probably much easier for us to talk to these people because there is not a factor of somebody calling them and they have to sell themselves to them. They pretty much already sold themselves. And correct me if I'm wrong, bro, but like when you call a towing company, you're already pretty much decided, right? You're trying to figure out the rates. That's pretty much it, right? But you know you want
Your
to
shit
tow.
on the side of the road with a flat tire. You're trying to get that shit
You
towed.
know you're trying to get towed, right? And that
Yeah.
also falls more with the emergency situation too. So we can use this to our advantage here because every missed call, there's a huge urgency window behind it. There's usually some sort of car situation that's happening in real time. And these guys, they're pretty much sold on the idea on that vehicle being towed. They just need the availability and to make sure that the price is good, which obviously you can't really sell them on the price, but you don't have to convince the core principle of why they should do a towing. They already have that. Okay, let's do the same as we did earlier for towing, auto repair, and tires, and tell me how many calls each are receiving on average per month, and we're gonna tell it to research and use online sources that are actual, right? So now what we're gonna do is we understand the three different types that exist in auto. We're just trying to compare them against each other and figure out which one of those has the most amount of calls and has the most amount of urgency that we can use to basically come to them and say, hey, the fact that you're missing this matters a lot more than the fact that you're not missing it. And we're saying, hey guys, we're coming in with a solution where, and once we figure that out, we have to compare all three of them together and figure out which one has the most amount of calls happening per month on average, right? Obviously, this is all statistical numbers we're pulling online, but there's a factual basis behind them. So that's what we're trying to use for our argument. And we're going to compare them and see which one out of those three. And I don't even think, by the way, we technically didn't even need to do this. We could have stopped at the fact that we found out plumbing companies on average are high ticket, meaning their jobs cost way more on average, right? We just saw these three right now. We didn't even see near the number of revenue per call even matching the $1,000 that's missed for the plumbers, right? On all three of them, that wasn't even the case. So unless they're getting an insanely amount of calls per month, I don't even think it's comparable. I think we're probably just gonna choose the best one from here. And when we say we're gonna do both industries, we're gonna do this one. And at the same time, we're gonna focus on plumbing, but I think we're gonna focus on plumbing much more than this. So a commonly cited operating range is 5 to 10 service calls per day for experienced operators. It's about 150 to 300 calls per month, assuming for 30 days. So towing calls are fewer than tire shops, but much more time critical, meaning missed calls are often unrecoverable. Just off of what we talked about earlier and the fact that they are like more time critical, I'm immediately gonna put towing over tires. So tires is out of the picture right now. Right now I'm comparing towing versus general auto repair. We don't want to go with dealership benchmarks. Actually, do we? Let's go over it. It's 500 service calls per month, but that's a dealership. That's not every independent shop, but it is a solid anchor for what a busy service operation looks like. Again, we're not really targeting dealerships here. We're targeting independent shops. Repair shops often high weekday call density. Can you take me today? But many calls are somewhat unrecoverable via callback texting. Okay, wait. A tire business case study on 3 tire locations reported 5,000 calls per month. What are you talking about, bro? What is this? No, that's not real. No way. What is this store? What is the source, bro? Facebook? Are you joking? It's just pulling numbers out of its ass, dude. Let's try this. Check for the tire shop numbers time against.
You think tire shops are getting that many calls? No way.
They're fucking not. I guarantee they're not. I don't know where I pulled this number from. And actually, let's
I need to
dig where.
start my own tire shop then. Damn, no way.
Couldn't find direct industry benchmarks on there isn't a wide published data set like this for broader auto service, but here's what's available evidence. Automotive repair service calls to hundreds of inbound, often so we don't have a baseline for tire shops. Just off of that, I'm probably gonna rule them out. And like just more common sense thing. I don't think anybody's like calling, hammering tire shops, asking for tires. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just gonna rule out tire shops, and we're gonna say towing and general auto repair. All right, let's dig into general auto repair because I don't think this is good enough. This is from Digital Dealer. What is this?
Look at that lady right there. She just closed the deal.
Yeah, this is dealerships, bro. We're not going at dealerships. Dealerships a little bit more of a corporate approach.
How did it come up with that?
It's from these guys, which I guess these
Yeah.
guys have whatever source they did. It got it from here. But again, who is Digital Dealer?
Look at that boy.
Networking experience. Looks like they hold expos.
Digital Dealer, eh?
Dig into more on the independent shop experience, not the dealer experience. Search online. Yeah, because again, like dealerships are not what we're trying to look at here.
Yeah. We're mainly just trying to stick with auto industries.
So a typical
Let's see.
independent shop was about 13 vehicle service per day, 24 calls per day, 500 per month. Where is this coming from? Okay, how do you skip this? Shocking facts on incoming service call. This is from 2006. Are you telling me there's not a single place, there's not a single source that's newer than 2006? We're not gonna go through with that.
Should we say site sources no later than 2024?
Let me finish reading through the rest of this. I want to see what this is saying. I think 300 calls per month is pretty normal. What that is basically 10 calls per day over a 30-day period. I think we can safely say 300 a month on independent shops. I think 10 is the higher end too. I don't think they're really all hitting 10. I think 7 to 10 is the range. Well, we're gonna verify it anyways later, so it's fine. So auto repair, they're getting, let's say 300 a month, 300 calls per month. How much did we say tire shops were getting? Oh, we had no idea. We just rolled them out. I'm just gonna mark these guys out. And then for towing, we had 5 to 10 service calls per day on average. So we'll take the middle point and call it 7. And so 7 times 3, it's 210 calls per month. We'll just say 210 calls per month, just to be in the middle. But you got to also think about the fact that these are 210 calls that are much higher urgency and window of closing and higher probability of them actually getting the job than these guys, right? So
Yeah.
let's average it out, right? Let's just say 100 to 500 per call. That's a pretty big range. I don't like that. What is, let's jump back here. Actually, let's just Google it. See what comes up here. What's the average towing cost? 75 to 125 for short local tows. I say $150 is pretty reasonable because nobody's really towing for 5 miles or less. Almost all the time it's between this. Nobody's really towing here either. So 125 to 300. What's the middle point for that? We'll just call it. All right, we'll just call it somewhere in the middle of this. So you know what? Let's just be fair. Let's just say $175 to $200. We're gonna say 175. 175. Okay, so let's add this up here real quick. Let me bring this down. Let's fill this guy out. So how often is this happening? Let's decide between these two first before we fill this out. Actually, let's math it out here. We're getting 300 to 600 per call for auto repair. We're gonna use the middle number and let's just say around 450 a job. So 450, and we're getting 300 calls per month. So what is that? 45, 90. It's 90 plus 45. That's 135. Hold up, wait. Let me write it down here. 135, and then you carry the zeros. No, what the fuck? One more zero. But 13,500. 450 times 3. Let me double check it. Oh wait, I missed a zero. 135. Do you believe that? That doesn't sound right. That's assuming that's assuming every call is a job, which that doesn't really make sense because most of these calls are not even jobs. Like, yeah, let's say they get 300 calls per month, but not all of them are actually calls. I would probably say a third of them end up being jobs. let's test it out. Let's say for 300 calls a month for auto repair shops, what is the average percent of calls that are actual revenue generating jobs versus all else? I'm guesstimating a third of those, about like 80 to 100. But again, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what happens. Look at that.
30%.
It's literally a third, pretty much.
You're so fucking smart.
We'll call it. Yeah, we'll say 100. We'll say 100, bro. So 450 times 100, 45K.
500.
Whereas for towing, we can actually use the 210 because pretty much every single one of them is up for grabs. And we're gonna say, and what do we say the average tow was? 175, right? So we'll do 175 times 210. Let's quickly math it out here. 175. That's 36,750. Now, here's the thing about these numbers. This one technically is higher. This one has a much higher urgency behind it. If we're thinking about an example where we're trying to figure out who's thirstier, right? You give both of these guys a bottle of water. This guy doesn't really need the water as much as this guy. Even though this guy's numbers are higher, these guys have more urgency, less leniency, and more room for that missed call to actually generate revenue. Meaning, if we're talking about a system that handles those missed calls and does whatever it needs to do with AI, it is more impactful for a towing company to miss these calls because they have such a short time span in how they can get converted. And a lot of the people that are calling are pretty much already sold. They sold themselves. They're just looking for somebody to do the job. Whereas this is not really the same, right? This could be a potential job. And you can also think about this has to go through diagnostics first. So I think even though this is a lower number, this is where voice AI has more impact. Literally just because of the fact that the people that are calling here, they're not having to resell themselves on the fact that they need a towing company. They're figuring out somebody who has availability, the right price, and who can actually fulfill it. Whereas these guys don't really hit the job unless they do a diagnostic. And even the diagnostic is nowhere near the number that it costs for them, which is 300 to 600. Nobody's paying 300 for a diagnostic. This is for the actual job. We're making sure that we're being pretty lenient here about these numbers, but I think we'll focus on towing companies, and I think we will focus on plumbing. So that's pretty much what we did. So now we can actually answer this, right? So how often is this happening for towing? This is happening 210 calls per month, and this is $100 to $500. You know, what do we call it? 175, right? We'll just say 175 average per call. And the frustration level. So we broke down why this is a much higher urgency, right? So we're just gonna bring them what we said earlier. People calling are already sold on the idea of needing towing. They need availability and fulfillment, right? So calling are already sold on the idea of needing towing. They need availability and fulfillment. Availability is much more valuable because it leads directly to revenue generation without much of sales. And then you have to think about the fact that missed calls are non-forgiving, meaning these guys are probably going to call a competitor directly, which if you guys notice, this is the exact same thing that happened with plumbing, right? Plumbing, the big factors that we noticed between plumbing and these guys is what? We have number 1 is urgency, 2, emergency, 3 is availability, and 4 is time. These 4 things were literally at the heart of almost everything we looked at between plumbing and towing. So you guys can see we started originally at home services. We didn't know that there was several different types of industries within it. Then we found out that there is plumbing, there's electrical, and there's HVAC. So what do? We looked at the average number of calls that each of these guys are receiving, and then we looked at how much each call is worth to each of them and how often those calls are coming in. Then we compared all 3 of them together, and we figured out where does our system actually belong the most, who is hurting the most, who's bleeding the most. We figured out that plumbers are bleeding the most because there's a higher urgency factor. There's all the time emergencies that are happening, and they're happening around the year. They're not seasonal like HVAC, meaning availability needs to be high and the time around it needs to be quick and it needs to be efficient for them to be able to take care of this and not lose the revenue that's on the table. Then we dug into the auto service industry, and then we found out there's the same kind of different types of businesses. We focused on the tire shops, the towing, and the auto repair. Those were the top three. We rolled out the tire shops because they're pretty small. There wasn't even much statistics that we can pull behind them. Just off of the fact that tire service shops don't have the same level of urgency. They're selling a product. They're not really selling a service, which basically rolled them out. And then we had the two other services, which were towing and the auto repair and service. And we compared those two. Even though it had less revenue, there was a much higher urgency and there was a much higher room for us to actually sell our service. We don't have to work as hard to get through the door with these guys because the fact that there is this urgency and emergency factor existing and their industry is less forgiving for missed calls, that gives us better room when we're talking about them, and that gives us more room to talk about the potential upside of what we're trying to sell them. It's harder hitting than auto repair. These guys are just bleeding more off of the fact that there's urgency and emergency and availability involved. So now what we're doing is we're pretty much done with figuring out those two. We figured out we need to focus mainly on plumbing, but also the fact that towing companies need the same kind of attention, except at a little bit of a different pace and a different approach. So for the next video, what we're going to do now, we're going to focus on what we need to do. In the beginning of day 3, we were doing home service versus auto. At the end of day 3, now that we're here, now we just solidified it down to towing versus plumbing. And we listed out literally exactly how we got here and why we got here. We're going to dive deeper into towing and plumbing and figure out what we need to build and how we need to look at each approach before we actually start putting together the different systems. But that's just pretty much the brain dump of how we got the towing and plumbing